and how both of them, I guess, radicalized people within their circles. So first of all, what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce you to Abu Muntasir Manwar Ali, and Shaykh Manwar or Shaykh Abu Muntasir will speak about his story for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I will go across to Frank Meenik, and he will speak about his story. And I will ask them some questions, and then I'll open it up to the audience, and they can ask them questions as well. Gentlemen, Frank and Manwar, is that okay? Okay, so let's unmute Sheikh Manwar Ali first. So let's see if I can do that. There you go. Okay, Sheikh Abu Muntasir Manwar Ali, are you ready to? Okay, if you could unmute.
Yes, well, thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Thank you for this opportunity. My thanks to Muhammad al-Abbasi for that brilliant introduction. I think if we stop calling each other Sheikh and such appellations is better. I don't propose to talk about religion in the manner of an imam or a cleric and discuss the ins and outs of any religious issues at all. As my remit tells me, is to say a few words about my so-called story. Story, of course, I'm an older man than perhaps most of you there that I can see. There might be other more elderly than me. But I'm over 60 years old, so a story of 60 years of life is going to take at least 60 minutes, a minute per year. But I'll talk for about 10 minutes, a very rough sketch. Right at the outset, I'd like to make it clear that I take very, I suppose, radical positions even now, not regarding myself, but in terms of how I see Islam and how I see the Muslim polity and how I see we need to sometimes overcome the barriers through counterintuitive and almost kind of like out of the box is the phrase they use, but activities which might kind of make people feel uncomfortable. So I'm a challenging type of character, unfortunately, even at this age. But those of you who know me perhaps in some detail would be very familiar with my so-called story, because I was at one time quite well known for how, as Muhammad al-Abbasi mentioned, became instrumental in promoting a type of Islam that radicalized people. I think that's what I should mention. I could talk about my childhood, that I was born in Bangladesh, 1959. I witnessed a war, the War of Liberation. Prior to that, the 1965 war. So both of them are etched into my memory. Some people, when they now talk about me, trying to reflect on my character, they would see trauma because my elder brother died in front of me in that war, along with other relatives. So a lot of conflict, a lot of upheavals. Father was in prison, I didn't go to school. Finally came to England, I went to school, college, university, job, just became totally, I suppose, ensconced in the British scene. But therein lay the problem. While I'm ensconced in the British scene, I wasn't just becoming a good citizen and a good member of society. I carried my past, carried my religious understanding, the ambitions that are connected to them, and began to foment for certain changes. So I became enthused by what I would call Salafism. There'll be some brothers and sisters who'd perhaps feel awkward or even kind of angry towards me for using words like that. Well, until we invent a good vocabulary, I mean, even the word terrorist and radicalization, they all can be expanded and nuanced. But for the sake of just this today's conversation, I turn to the Quran and the Sunnah, the two primary texts of the Islamic religion, in a very kind of literal manner, following primarily the Saudi kind of interpretation. I became close to the students of Sheikh Al-Albani, if you know the name, and I even went and met him in Jordan. So part like an Albaniyun Salafi, but also following Ibn Uthaymeen, Ibn Baz. These names were prominent in the 90s. Saudi establishment scholars, if you like. But what's the point of all that? Well, I ended up fighting, as Muhammad al-Abbasi mentioned. And that wasn't just a kind of flimsy act. It wasn't a temporary act. It went on for 15 years. So, of course, I didn't take part in full-scale combat for long periods of time. But I did see combat action in the mountains of Afghanistan. I went to Kashmir to fight against the Indian soldiers. I went to Burma to fight with the Rohingyas. But that can't happen in a vacuum. So I had to create support. I had to not only talk about how the Muslims are suffering or the victims are so hard pressed to live a normal life, but I had to talk about how Islam as a religion, gives us merit and credit to strive in its path. So I suppose I took jihad on board in a very traditional sense, as you might find in the classical works of Islam. And then I added politics to it. Then all the other party kind of discussion. So unfortunately, 15 years of that made me, as the time went by, reflect on my actions, the consequences, if you like. It made me understand about the internal rivalries, the corruption, the futility of such type of actions, and how we are ultimately just pawns in the checkerboard, from international powers. Times change, technologies change, people's minds change. We grow older, our kids grow up in front of us. I'm a grandfather now, alhamdulillah. But then I meet other kinds of people. So I start reflecting on myself as well. So study, looking at consequences, and knowing myself, self-awareness. And I think that's fundamental to any type of so-called extremism, that a person who has become maybe unbalanced because of true grievances, valid kind of observations or concerns, but not having had enough knowledge and experience to be balanced, they need to have at least self-awareness. So I always highlight that in the current work that I do, which is interventions work for the Home Office. That do you know yourself, know your place, and what are you meant to be? So I met all sorts of people, including Frankie. Of course, I was kind of like very afraid to meet some of these people, Frankie and others, in the Dublin conference, because, when you look at somebody, you take them at face value, first impression, and you think, well, we're all supposed to have changed, but, well, he looks a bit off-putting or frightening. So these kind of reactions I understood. So I met Jews, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs through chaplaincy work, community work, voluntary work in kind of charities. And I read a great deal of books. I remember hardly a fraction. My memory is not very good. I don't claim to be an imam and sheikh of that stature, but I can safely say for myself, I know my religion or my deen, and I'm fully at home and completely comfortable to be British, to be part of this country, to know that my identity is not conflicted because I'm Muslim or I have a long beard or because I have brown skin. None of that matters. I feel completely at home. I feel this is my country, my people, and Islam supports me. And what I've done now, that's my last thing I'm going to say. So what I've done now is what I'm doing now rather, is trying to make amends. So I can only do that in two ways. Make amends. I can't just say, well, I'm sorry guys, I was wrong. And I was perhaps too harsh. And now, well, it's nice you've forgiven me. That gives me some breathing space. I can go and enjoy life. Some people do that, leave them alone. But I'm not of that nature. So I said, first I have to make it up to my family, my wife, my children, and all the others I've hurt, not by design, not with intent. I think I was always sincere, which will be my saving grace on the day of judgment. But of course, I have put them out a lot and neglected them. My kids, I never saw them grow up for 20 years. And you can imagine that type of so-called sacrifice. It's my fault. I'm not blaming anyone, but it wasn't in vacuum. You had a lot of imams supporting me across the board, not just Salafis. And the heritage of Islam in terms of books and the knowledge that we have, that reinforced me, then made me question. And now the second thing is the amends that I do is not simply my family and how to stop people becoming radicalized and advising them or persuading them, if you like, please don't make the same mistakes. The second thing is, of course, I now focus on those aspects of my religion, which I do worship Allah, pray 5 times a day. Some people might think, well, even a hypocrite can do that. Okay, this hypocrite prays 5 times a day in congregation at home whenever he can. But I try to focus on those aspects of religion, misogyny. Whether it's FGM, whether it's about a woman doesn't have the same right of divorce as the man, and all the way across to other issues like slavery. We can all join or not join, but support in theory the BLM movement. But hang on, until our imams and clerics and the scholars, the fuqaha and the du'at and all these people address the issue of slavery from the religious perspective, you'll still have people today. Like I spoke to a guy 2 days ago, not ISIS or anything, someone sitting in England, in East London, a revert brother, a convert, saying, well, we should restore slavery. It's more humane than how it used to be, but we should have it because religion sanctions it. So I don't focus on this type of things about Islamic aspects which need updating or modification from the fiqh point of view. Sharia is Sharia. So that's my story. Upheaval in childhood, became a jihadi, was a normal Hanafi Bengali Muslim, Bangladeshi Muslim, glad to be British, now totally identified with my country. I'm patriotic. I have no hang-ups about my skin color and my beard length and had all this kind of nonsense. These issues, we make identity politics. I'm not into that. I want to make amends. And as a Muslim, part of that is about how we absorb the religion in life, in our culture and context, so we can all live happily. But ultimately, I, as an individual, can make it to paradise by God's grace and mercy. Thank you very much. I'll mute myself now so others don't. I can carry on, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, Manwar. Thank you for those words. I was just busy writing some questions down, and there was a question coming in, so I'll keep those to the end. Now, Frank, shall we hear your story? Let me just
Absolutely,
unmute.
and yep,
Hi.
absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for coming on and listening. So, as Frank Meeink, I'm from the States. I was born and raised on the East Coast of America in the city of Philadelphia. The trauma, we just talked about the trauma. I grew up with drug addicted parents, being on welfare, on the dole, always embarrassed in my life that we were struggling. And my parents, again, both being drug addicts, I really didn't have time for me. I did go to Catholic church when I was a kid because you had to, because I lived in a very Irish Catholic neighborhood. So I was raised around the Catholic church. I'm no longer Catholic, and I don't knock the Catholicism at all, because people can still be enlightened through Catholicism, and I have no judgment on that. But I'm not Catholic anymore, but I grew up being Catholic. Stepfather came along, abusive. For when I was about 8 till I was about 13, I lived in a home literally with a bully who hated my guts. He was my stepfather, and to go home every day like that, some days I just wish death, or I'd rather sometimes just get hit by a car and go to a hospital. Now, I grew up in this Philadelphia streets. I try to get hit by cars, and it didn't happen. But I remember wanting to get hit by a car some days just not to go home. Eventually, I get kicked out. I move with my real dad, and I move into this all-black neighborhood in Philadelphia, and I go to an all-black school where I fist fight a lot. And that summer, I got to go meet up with these neo-Nazis in the farmlands of Pennsylvania, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which is where all Amish people live. And my cousin lived up there, and he was part of this neo-Nazi group. And so when I first went up there, I would just hang out with these older members of this group, and they would drink beers with me. And I was 13 going on 14, and they would say things about Black people, and I knew that they didn't know what they were talking about, right? So these older neo-Nazis would start to ask me, what's it like growing up around Black people? And what's it like growing up where you grow up? And what that did to me was that gave me someone asking me about my life. See, my parents didn't ask me when I came home with black eyes or I did really good in sports. My parents never asked me when I walked in the door, how's your life, son? How's school? They had no time for me. So when these guys would talk to me, I liked that. They would ask me questions about where I grew up. And as I got more into that, I started to join the Christian conservative, or the Christian part of this movement, the neo-Nazi white supremacist movement. So that's called Christian identity. And it's the same thing. It's an extreme belief that the Jews are the seed of Satan, that Eve was tricked to not take of this piece of fruit, but to have sex with the serpent and impregnate her with Cain, who Cain later on kills Abel, and that Cain is the first evil Jew on the planet. Now, I was born and raised, like I said, Catholic. I went to church on Christmas and Easter, or I, maybe lied to my parents and said I went to church on Christmas and Easter. But I never heard Father Wassel or Sister Mary Agnes, the nuns, ever tell me the story out of the Bible about Cain being the first Jew. So I remember asking them, the older ministers, like, why doesn't everyone know this? Why doesn't, and he said, Frank, God chose you to know it now. You are going to be one of the angels that ruined Sodom and Gomorrah, and America is Sodom and Gomorrah. You're taking a kid from welfare in the Philadelphia streets, and now you're telling me that I'm on God's team and that they're going to arm me, that I belong to something. And I would have given my life for that movement. I would have been the next Timothy McVeigh if I didn't get out before that happened. My life revolved around every movement, everything that they said. It was my lifeline. It gave me meaning. It gave me purpose when nobody else wanted me. And so anyway, I got into that and I got very extreme. I got into recruiting other people into it. I would go on all the TV shows. I had my own cable access television show at 17, 18 years old. The movement moved me all across the country. I was always wanted by the police and in and out of jail. Eventually, I kidnapped an Antifa member Antifa is now coming to the forefront of life now, but at the time I kidnapped one of their leaders and held him for ransom over Christmas. And eventually I went to prison for that. While I was in prison, I truly believe that God stepped in my life. I do know that God stepped in my life. And there's my testimony that would take a long time for that, but I just know that I started to give my life over to a power greater than myself. And he started to consistently put people in my life to prove me wrong. Consistently, this guy was saying, who are you to judge, Frank? Who are you? These are all my children. We're all God's children. Like, how dare me judge when I'm the one that has these anger and evil? And I really did, guys. I broke every commandment being part of that movement. And I know to this day that God still loves me. And that if God loves me so much, then he loves you so much. And I can't harm you now because you're now part of God's love. What I've come to find out now throughout my life, and I love that we brought up BLM and Black Lives Matter, because my job on this planet now, it is to make the amends, and it is to just not go around and say, hey, I'm sorry for what I did, but it's to say, I done wrong. How can I make that right so that I can have a real adult relationship with people? I had to start knowing the facts about myself that made me hate others. My narcissism, my fears, my egos. You know, that's what a lot of conspiracy theory people, if you really get down to the nits of it, they're narcissistic people. They think that the world revolves around them and that people are trying to keep secrets from them. And so when I can get rid of my narcissism and know that my only job is to be of service to other of God's children every day as much as I can. And that doesn't mean I have to run around and be a people pleaser, but to be there when the call comes to be of service to all of his children. And to stand up for Black Lives Matter is being of service to God, because it is standing up for others. We have a system here in America that is broken. We're going to have by the time our census comes out, we have 2.7 million children of God in prison in this country. 1.5 out of 3 women locked up in the world are locked up in America. And right now we are in extreme battle over here and around the world. And we have extreme battle of people that are worshiping an idol. And God so warns us against that. So I know that as a former, we have the antibodies to this virus of extremism in us. And it is our job now, by God, to go and spread the antibodies of extremism to the world. That's why we went through what we went through. The amends process is because I can use my past to now be part of my, to be productive for us in America today or in our society. I know that I can't hate today. And I truly bought into that lifestyle. I truly brought into it's a bait and switch. They told me that if I joined this group, I could be proud to be white. And it isn't. You join these groups, and when you join, they take your false pride and they tell you this hate other people, that it's not about your heritage, it's about others are failing us. And that's all ego and fear. And it's a bait and switch. Hey, come to be part of our group. We'll be proud of our heritage. And then you go and we never talk about our heritage. And the parts of our heritage that we do talk about are the bad parts. We don't talk about how white people did this great humanity stuff. It's always the bad. They have no pride in the humanity and the humility that people and their heritage brought to this country, only the ones that stood up proudly with ego and idolism. So I'm truly blessed that I've lived the life that I live. I'm truly blessed that sometimes in my life I starved as a child, but it lets me now be of service to another person who's been like that. And that is our job on this planet. And I've converted to Judaism because I found out that my last name, Meeink, M-E-E-I-N-K, I found out just a couple of years ago that it was Jewish. Find the word of a loving God by reading Torah every day and knowing that I'm just a servant, to have a servant heart, and to come to this world and know that my job at the end of the day is, if someone says, wow, Frank, you did a really nice thing, I say that was because of God. It was because of God, not because of me. Last things I will say on humility and humbleness. I grew up in my life, I always thought, and I used to joke and say the saying throughout my life, I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. I swear to you, I used to say that all the time. I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. You know who else says that? Every other human being on the planet. But when I came to the terms that I'm not much, but I'm all God made me, so make the best of this at this time, that's humility. Humility is, I don't think less of myself, but I think about myself less, and to be there for others. Again, I had to know the facts about myself to be able to help other people going through these things. And I think that's what a lot of us formers are doing right now, because our world needs us right now. And again, to do it humbly, not to be like, hey, I'm tough, I live this crazy life. It's God pulled me through a life so that I can now be of service to all of his children. And right now we're dealing in the States with a lot, with the idolism and the police reform, but I have faith that we're going to get through this. I have a faith that God is going to make sure that idol worshiping doesn't last long, and it'll happen when it's supposed to. It'll collapse on itself. And I don't need to go over there and violently take out anyone on that side. I'll let God handle that, and I'll just be here for his children when they get done being brainwashed and worshipped and idol worshiping. And that's our job. That's my job. Thank you guys so much for having this event. Thank you for asking me to take part in this. I hope I didn't talk too fast. I know my English is kind of crazy, but much love, and thank you, brothers and sisters, for standing with us. And we're going to get through this together. We will. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks, Manwar. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to ask just a couple of questions of Manwar and then yourself, Frank. And what I will do, I will open it up to the audience if they can ask you questions. Feel free to ask you questions. If you feel that you don't want to ask questions directly, just inbox me and I will ask on your behalf. You know, one of the things that you said, Manwar, Shaykh Manwar, is that you also had trauma in the 1965 and the 1970 war. How does that make you feel now, today, when you think about that trauma, that pain, that suffering?
Yes, thank you. No, they are just memories, aren't they? I mean, everybody has something they have encountered which is not good or desirable in their lives. It's nothing special in that sense. I mean, I survived. I was a young person, so perhaps I felt it in a different way than a grown up would have done. Yeah, but I saw. I mean, what was the trauma in '65? I was 7 or 8 years old, but I remember very clearly the dogfights over the skies of the then East Pakistan. But 71 was much more traumatic because I was about 11 to 12. And when my brother is killed and others are dying and people are dying next door and there's warfare going on in the streets, I witnessed the crackdown and all that. It was very, very violent. It was extremely violent because I saw the surrender of the Pakistan army. You know, my relatives were caught into that. My father was sent to prison. He surrendered to the Indian army. And I was 12, 13, 14, 15, 4 years it went on like that. Then eventually I came to this country at the age of 17, although I had been prior to that here. I never felt traumatized. It's a good question you ask. I felt vindictive in the past. I would hate the Awami League. They were the people, Mujibur Rahman's people in Bangladeshi politics, we can say who brought about. They're not solely responsible, but we can say they brought about the breakup of Pakistan and independent Bangladesh. Now, I would happily embrace them. I'll work with them for peace, for helping the poor, or for what enhances the country's prospects for its citizens. I have no qualms against my brother's murderer. I know who the people were. I wouldn't like them to be, I've forgiven them. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Forgiveness releases you and takes away that kind of heaviness inside, which kind of pollutes how we ought to get on with perhaps coming closer to God, or simply serving humanity or enjoying life. You're carrying that grudge inside you. But also the second point, very quickly, is I also found later on through greater study, more mixing and talking to others, at one point I ended up doing Hajj. So in Makkah, where I was staying, the brother whom I shared the room with, he was a fighter for, on the opposing side, Mukti Baini, used to call them, with the Indian kind of like people. My father was a collaborator with the Pakistan army. So I ended up doing Hajj with them. And that's the best way to reconcile. You are at Makkah outside the Kaaba, and you have both carry past, and you would have killed each other 30 years ago. But here you are now. You realize there is truth on all sides. There is falsehood or misunderstanding on all sides. So thank you for that question. It's a long subject we can talk about. But I think that's also very important, that whether formers or not formers, people who have become highly concerned about any event, any political situation, they try their best to try and understand the other sides if they can. Even if you talk about Conservative and Labour or BLM movement, just all round as much, and take a step back and take a less aggressive kind of stance. Thank you.
Thanks, Manwar. Frank, one of the things that you mentioned is that you came across the Amish. What kind of sense of feeling that you got from the Amish? Because they're all non-violent, lovely, lovely people, but I've seen some of your old photos where you're all kind of different. Yeah. What kind of response did you get from them initially? Oh, sorry, you're muted. Let me just unmute you. Hold on. Unmute.
Okay, there you go. Thanks for the question. That's out of the whole story. I love that's the question. I do. The Amish were amazing. I mean, there were no Amish neo-Nazis. Just want to point that out. They're not like that. They are pacifists and amazing, wonderful people. But I could tell you, as a city kid, again, growing up in the ghetto, the hood, whatever you want to call it, that summer going up to live with around Amish people. Again, my family wasn't Amish, but they lived on a 4-mile long dirt road that had 3 Amish families on it. And I would think and see them and think, when I would see them really turn butter, and they weren't like reenacting it for amusement, they were really living that way, and they go around on horse and buggies and farming. That was National Geographic stuff to me. That was so far, like, I thought that was reenactment stuff, and I really seen these people living. But the Amish and the neo-Nazis have no tie, and they never really, Amish people are just always pacifist. So they would see us and just wave, and, no one ever messed with them, or, there was nothing there for it. So, but the Amish people were beautiful people.
Brilliant, brilliant. One of the things is William Pierce from the Christian Identity. I think it's the National Alliance. Did he and his teachings have an effect on you in any way? Like, for example, here in the UK, as Manwar can testify, there's a guy called Omar Bakri Muhammad, who some of whose teaching speeches kind of radicalized quite a few British Muslims. But is there, with Dr. William Pierce, did he have a similar kind of effect on American white nationalists or white Americans?
Yeah, absolutely. William Pierce was the professor behind all this. He was a very well thought of man in the movement, and people took a lot of what he said as a plan for the race war of this country. And in fact, when they caught Timothy McVeigh of the Oklahoma City bombing, he had Turner Diaries on him, which is which is one of his books. So his rhetoric is still considered, again, close to what close to God on that side. So that he was a messenger of God.
Okay. Sheikh Manwar, with Omar Bakri Muhammad, did you meet him in the 1980s or 1990s? Did you get to connect with him or talk to him?
Unfortunately, no, because I kind of avoided him on purpose. Our paths crossed. I've met him, meaning we have encountered each other. Our presence were in the same place at Regent's Park Mosque and things like that. So to that degree, we have met, but I've met many of their followers. Initially, as you know, they were Hizb ut-Tahrir, and we used to have very, very close and frequent and intense, shall I say, discussion, might be argumentation or heated discussion with Hizb ut-Tahrir members, because we dominated the scene in the British universities and colleges in the 80s and 90s. And gradually we waned out and they waxed in and they kind of took over, because Jimas, my organization, was pretty much what I am, who I am and so on. And we split, as usual. Muslims always split, and factionalism, sectarianism. But besides all that, Omar Bakri, I mean, he was not a Salafi to start with, and that's the key point. He followed a type of Islam which kind of made them at loggerheads with us, the so-called Salafis. I think on both sides we were all shallow, and that's the key point. That when we have not enough knowledge and information, we run with the jargon. So they would go with the jargon, we would go with our name dropping of this sheikh, that sheikh. And because we were kind of Salafi type, let's say, or Salafis, we always go back to the text. Here's a hadith, a quotation from Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, meaning a traditional narration from the Prophet from one of the hadith books, a corpus of prophetic literature. And they would not be very good at encountering or countering that. But that was naughty, to put it mildly, of us, because we shouldn't be arguing with religion. So Omar Bakri then went through a transformation and gradually became Salafis like us, then an ultra Salafi, but with the militant tendency. And I know that from speaking with Anjum Chaudhry, I've spoken to a lot. I've spent 40, 50 hours speaking with Anjum, who took over after Omar Bakri was ejected from this country, that he wasn't allowed to come back. Turner Diaries, I haven't read, by the way, because Frankie mentioned it. I did obtain a copy, and there's 500 pages. I've got other things to read before that, how to be a better person myself. But yeah, Turner Diaries and others. I've seen a number of so-called far-right guys in this country. And part of the wonderful thing that we are doing, which others might pick up, is that whatever our background, Muslim, non-Muslim, far-right, far left, or Muslim, Islamic extremist or not, if we just dialogue with reasoning and then try to understand, not even questioning and grilling anybody, about half a dozen so-called far-right people have now become like my friends, and they were like EDL supporters and BNP supporters and what have you. Some are 50, 60 years old. That all gets hidden because it's not popular on the YouTube, and we can't advertise our work. And it's not showy kind of stuff. It all happens behind closed doors, or two old men talking for half an hour. So I think OBM, we should ignore him, leave him alone. The more we talk about these personalities, the more we give them air, and we kind of like muddy the water. The water is settled. Let people move on. Mosques are moving on. Imams are moving on. Muslims are moving on. Why go back to in the history of how we have misbehaved? I misbehaved, and that's the main thing. I taught things wrongly. Jimas contributed to a lot of problems in this country. That's more important than me sitting here pontificating about Hizb ut-Tahrir and Omar Bakri. That's background knowledge. How are we going to now make a difference so people can feel more at ease and have a fuller and more enriched life? And that's why my loyalty lies now. How we can live the rest of our lives and meet God, Allah, on the day of judgment with our sins forgiven and the highest place in paradise, inshallah.
Just before you go, Manwar, you do know that I was going to ask you slightly kind of painful, I guess, questions or harsh questions, and you gave me your permission, so I will ask.
You can ask me anything.
One question. When you were engaged in jihad in Afghanistan or various countries, did you kill anyone?
No, but Muhammad, that's not the point, is it? Why would a person go? Let's put it in a kind of like sanitized context, sanitized. Ignore the politics, the manipulation, the corruption, and all the other stuff. Sanitized context. A person decides, fueled by the Quran and the Sunnah, for the sake of Allah, for the sake of God, fi sabilillah, to go and join a group of fighters, mujahideen, call them if you may, who are battling against clear-cut enemies. That's how we saw it, Russians or communists and so forth, or Indian army or the Burmese Buddhist armies. Okay, here are these people. Clear-cut enemy, Muslims oppressed, you going off for the sake of God with a sincere intention. To do what? Whether you kill people or not kill people, your intention is to kill or be killed. I sought martyrdom. I make no, I don't hide the fact, and I still seek martyrdom, not fighting futile battles for warlords and killing each other and harming innocent people. But martyrdom, where Allah accepts me, that my heart is pure, I try to live up to his dictates as best as I could with my faults and sins. No, I did not kill anybody. I certainly shelled and I shot and I fired rockets to kill people. I volunteered to execute people, by the way. I did do that. I'm guilty of that. That's your enthusiasm. That's how you get carried away. That's why I take so much passion in warning people. Look, don't put yourself in that situation. No matter how brave and strong you are and how deeply sincere you are for God, Prophet, or against the oppressors, for the Muslim or non-Muslim victims. Learn to be more mature, learn to have human values and compassion. So I volunteered. I would say, thank God, Allah decreed, God ensured I didn't end up being in that situation. Put me in the front. I will shoot for you those prisoners of war, Russian prisoners. I volunteered. I never got the opportunity. Alhamdulillah. Imagine now how I would suffer now if I had done that. So Allah protects, Allah guides. Well, why do you have to go through such painful, long route of discoveries and finding out how it's a costly burden to bear, when you can cut all that short, but simply knowing yourself, knowing your religion for what it is in terms of worship, purification of the heart, serving humanity, loving each other. As Frankie Meeink says, 10 commandments, all the 10 commandments, every single one of them we can apply as a Muslim and go to paradise. Or the 7 Noahide laws. If, as Frankie said, he's now converted to Judaism. Why not? Ahlul Kitab. So I think I feel flustered because normally I get emotional, I start crying, and I'm a very sentimental, emotional person. Now I feel why must we always be so curious? I'm not being angry at you, Brother Muhammad. Why must we be so curious? Have you killed? I get asked in every session, from TEDx talk to this, to a radio interview. Yeah, okay, I killed 15 people. No, I didn't kill anybody. Principle, don't seek to harm, try to love. Don't be so dogmatic about doctrines. Learn to understand people's differences. So I think it was wicked enough wanting to kill people. And I would say now, sorry to make it so prolonged, I'm not a takfiri. I used to argue against Abu Hamza in Brixton Mosque, for example. We oppose Abu Qatada in this country. These were big shots, the takfiri jihadists. I was never a takfiri. But you can safely turn around and say, but Muntasir, are you sure you weren't? When you went to Afghanistan to kill those so-called communists for the sake of Allah, who were you fighting? Half or more of those people were Afghani Muslims. They are still praying, they're still fasting, they still got the beards and they're revering the Quran. They just happen to be on the wrong side. Well, who are you, Abu Muntasir, to decide who is on the wrong side? They wanted better land rights, more food, better jobs. You don't know the poverty and the discrimination against them. So they invite the Russians in. So we take idealistic positions. Sorry, I'm shouting at you. We take idealistic positions. But if you're a young person, talk to me, discard my ideas, rubbish me, call me a kafir if you have to. Listen to the ideas, process it for the sake of God so you can enjoy your life. That's the appeal we make as an intervention provider or as a Muslim or a kind of imam that I am. I don't regret this experience, but I have to make amends. And I will always hug my brother Frankie for this, in working together for common good and humanity, than sit with imams in a mosque pontificating about stuff which have no relevance to practical life today. Sorry, I got excited.
No, the thing is, it's not that I feel in any way attacked or insulted by yourself, Manwar. The thing is, I have a great deal of respect for you, and you knew I was going to ask you this question. So you're like thinking, Oh, okay. But Frank, similar question to you, because I know American History X is mostly based on your story, but there was a point in American History X where um, uh, just before the character Edward Norton went into prison and got arrested, he killed a Black American on the curb. Um, did you what kind of stuff did you kind of do that you also kind of regret, like similar kind of violent stuff?
You know, I'll tell you just, you know, I don't like to really go over the violent stuff, and not for, and it's because I don't want people to listen to this and say that was cool or that was good or wow, that guy, because when I did things to people, I was being an absolute coward, right? A lot of times I set out to harm others. And so in any way, shape or form. And like I said, I don't brag that I've broken all 10 commandments. I have. And it's just, it is life. And I know that I have to live with that. But I also, like we were just saying, the amends. I get to make living amends every day. The American History X, just to set the record straight, there was only 2 former neo-Nazis out back when that movie was being written. Me and a guy named TJ Lydon, who's a great brother of mine who can't really do the speaking circuit anymore because due to some medical issues. But me and his story were out there. And then they kind of wrote this story, and it kind of fit a little both of me and TJ's story in it without my permission, but that's fine because it's God's movie. That movie was made. I'm glad it wasn't specifically given to me as or any of that stuff, because I probably couldn't have handled it at the time. So I allow American History X just to be American History X. It's done a lot of good in this world. It has brought a lot of people to write me and say, I want to get out. So I'm very blessed at that movie, but it's not my whole story or even contributed to me, but everyone knows it is my story. I did go to prison. I did play sports. I got close to the Black inmates because of who I was. And so that's what I'll say on the violence. It's the part of my life that I regret the most. Like I have no right to put my hands on another child of God in anger ever. And, you know, maybe if I'm playing hockey or boxing or playing a sport, yes, I get that. But in life, I don't have the right to put my hands on another child of God in a violent way. So I'm very embarrassed about the hundreds and hundreds of acts in 7 years I was part of.
Thank you. Thanks for that. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to open this up for other friends who can ask questions. Fiaz Shah, who's using the name Muhammad Abbasi there because I sent him my link, he couldn't get in. So Fiaz Shah Saab, I'm going to unmute you. If you can ask a question, just ask to unmute. So can you press your unmute button?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good evening, brothers and friends.
Alaikum salam.
My question is to Mr. Muhammad Munawar.
Just your grandkids again, aren't they? They know exactly what to do.
Run in, just me handle her first.
Sure.
I retired from army.
Yes.
In about 37 years, I spent in Pakistan Army. Once I was in a very sensitive operational directorate, and my boss was a Christian officer in Pakistan Army. And my question is to Muhammad Munawar. One day, we would discuss things frankly. Although he was senior to me, he was my boss, but still we would share ideas frankly. he once said, since I had beard and apparently I looked like more conservative Muslim, so that Christian senior, he one day said a little a different thing which offended me at that very time. I was major, he was lieutenant colonel. He said, look, you talk about Afghan jihad, it was a mock jihad. I really, in that age, I mean, say this is something 25, 30 years back I'm referring to. So he said it was a mock jihad. How do you justify this? And you fought it. I also got offended, but I asked him, sir, how do you say that it was a mock jihad? He said, look, it was not jihad of Islam and non-Muslim, Muslims and non-Muslim. It was a war being fought between USA and USSR. And this was their war. It was not your war. How did you justify this jihad? Brother Munawar, that time I was offensive. I didn't like it. I was very emotional. But now, when I have crossed 60 and I am around 60 now my thought is little different. And now I, in retrospect, think that my being offensive at that time was not correct. And now I feel, yes, it was not our jihad for that matter. It was a war being fought between USA and USSR. And we were used for this war. It was not our war. Since I've come across a person like you who have a first-hand experience, and this is a platform provided by Mr. Muhammad Mansha Abbasi, and very rare opportunity to learn something firsthand. So I would like to seek your comments on this, Mr. Munawar.
Let me just unmute Munawar, and there you go. You're on the spot now.
Okay, thank you very much for that question and observation. For the immediate response, Sheikh Fiaz, is that I totally agree with you. As an afterthought, upon more learning, greater insights, I come to the same conclusion. We were used, and we took part, and others who took part, no matter what their intention and sincerity and the kind of their feelings for supporting the weak and vulnerable, the oppressed, they were pawns. That's why I meant they're pawns on a checkerboard, and we never understood how the international politics plays out, and the country itself uses, the Pakistan in this case, uses, people like us. But the way we justified is precisely that we felt clever. And so many of the imams who supported us also thought they were clever. And that's what I would advocate to people, that, please don't try to be smarter than knowledge that permits you to be. Please admit to your ignorance, or have that humility of lack of saying, I don't know. Because the way we justified was by saying, well, we know they're up to their games, they'll try to use us. And the Cold War is on, and the Americans and Russians are kind of like vying for power and influence and so on. But we, the Muslims, the first point of delusion, we are supported by God. God is on our side. It's like God is on nobody's side who is deluded and wants to be cruel and barbaric. But we didn't know that, or pretended not to know. Secondly, well, we will use them. They are playing games with us, but we will use them to get what we want. So using this conflict, we will get power by winning the war and then consolidate our positions. That mentality is still found in England today, because a couple of years back, or well, some years back, one of the most well-known so-called sheikh in Britain, sometimes is called the Mufti of Britain. I won't name him. If you don't know who he is, doesn't matter. but he has prominence, he has traction. A lot of young people listen to him. He said to me in a car journey from Leicester to London, the 3 hours in the car together, and he's saying to me, look, Abu Muntasir, we know the Americans are playing this game, and we know that they want us to be with this group and that group. We know what their game is, but we know what our game is. So it's this false pride and false kind of like the understanding of the realities of politics and the nature of how people are. We kind of like override that. It's because of this insight, the question you asked and what you just pointed out, you are used. It's a mock jihad. It is not Islam against the kuffar, like in Makkah, Medina, that whatever happened. It's not a battle of Badr or Uhud. It is not about they have all attacking Muslims and wipe us out and exterminate Islam. It was never like that. There's politics involved. So same thing is happening in Syria. The only problem now we find is, so how do we help real people on the ground who are suffering? The Afghanis who got killed or wounded or deprived of or dispossessed in those days due to politics, or now in Syria, people are dispossessed and suffering, whether Assad or Russia or America, how do we help them? So all we have to do is now say, well, if we haven't figured that out, don't do anything reckless. But if there are alternatives, which there are, even praying, then stick to those, don't become reckless yourself. So I fully concur with you, Sheikh Fiaz, and I regret making that mistake. My appeal would be to Allah, I hope our sincerity will be enough to win over his mercy, over his anger.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Manwar. Muhammad Sunny, you have a question? Can you unmute?
Yeah, thank you, Ustaz Abbasi. Assalamualaikum to everyone. And my name is Sunny from Indonesia. I've worked with a few institutes against radicalism, tackling radicalism back then a few years ago in Indonesia. And I've noticed that most of the issues that not just like connected to religion such as ISIS, but lots of things often fail because of they lack the lack of understanding of other people, the ideology itself. And the thing is, it actually happened a few minutes ago in Facebook when there's one guy using a pseudonym trying to troll me that because even though I'm into religion and stuff, but I'm also into science. And he said that people who are into science shouldn't believe that God exists. And I try to prove otherwise because I have my own standing there. And it happens to me a lot of times, when I said things about religion, when I said things about Islam, there are people that according to people that I followed, like Ustaz Abbasi or Sheikh Paul or even Dr. Safi Kaskas, it's not really what he said right on point. I mean, the understanding should be changed and everything. And sometimes they kind of troll me that much, and that brings me into someone that full of hatred. That's sometimes I feel like one of these days those guys I was going to be will be get ridden of. Those guys will be like this and that. And the only reason why I didn't do that is because there are people like Ustaz Abbasi, like taking jokes with me. Come on, Sunny, take a look at just see them as clowns and stuff. But deep under, you will have that kind of hatred. So I've been questioning myself, how can we actually get rid of those hatred. I mean, you guys have a lot of experience on that, and I believe that I can learn some kind of trick or whatever it is to apply to myself. Because, you know, sometimes even though I want to tell them good things, I want to make them smart, but they refuse to learn. And there's a proverb that the road to hell is paved by good intention. So yeah, maybe someday I will become a terrorist myself. I don't know. Just because I want people to be smart.
Thank you, Sunny. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, I mean, I think both Shaykh Manwar and I was going to say Shaykh Frank. So Frank and Manwar can actually probably ask those questions. Manwar, shall we ask Frank what he thinks? Because I think Frank's pretty good at this as well. He's let me unmute. Frank, you go first, and then we ask Manwar.
Okay.
His question.
Let's let me see here.
So basically, it's about science and religion. People thinking that a religious person shouldn't do science and shouldn't pursue science.
You know, my take on that is that science is here to advance human beings. That God gave us the knowledge to get that science, to, you know, medical science. Who knows? You know, I think about science this way. We've created science to kill ourselves with nuclear bombs and all that, but also I think that might have drug us through. You know, someday we're going to have to worry that this planet is going to be hit by an asteroid. It's happened before. This isn't a myth. This isn't a conspiracy. I think that we become intelligent enough that we should get together to build some type of system that will knock an asteroid away from hitting us. Like, that's the science I see that God has given us to be able to be of service to one another, to save our lives. And so I see nothing wrong with science at all. I don't see any conflict in science and God whatsoever in my view, in my concept of my higher power and my creator, is that science is fully there for us to take advantage of, because God's given us that knowledge to learn that. So
super. Manwar, your answer to Sunny?
Well, thank you, Brother Muhammad, for that question, and thank you, Brother Muhammad Abbasi, for the opportunity. I can see Sheikh Ramsi there. I mean, I know we are Facebook friends. I greatly admire your work. I've never had the chance to speak to you ever. And one day, inshallah, I'll visit you in Oxford, and inshallah learn from some of the actions that you do. And also Sheikh Paul is sitting there, and he hasn't said a word. I know it's our so-called show, but we have people here who are very knowledgeable and experienced as well. But anyway, give whatever that is. At the end of the day, I would say to this Brother Muhammad who asked the question, look, you know, if only you could spend a bit more time with Sheikh Safi Kaskas, for example, and others you mentioned, learning about how there are different ways of understanding or interpreting, using the rules of interpretation and the usulul fiqh and din and sharia and maqasid, everything. That there are so many ways of understanding how to actually devise a jurisprudence or fiqh, which is appropriate for our time. That's the first point. Secondly, you'll also find how things were not so clear-cut in how we assert certain positions today. So whether we talk about jihad or women's rights, or even simple thing like, shall we take the COVID-19 vaccine or not? You know, Islam or the Quran and Sunnah did not come to teach science. It's not scientific, it's not about scientific theories and so on, but it has certain indications which science may disprove or prove, but in the end it's all theories. Allah speaks the truth, and the central truth is about himself and about our way of life in submission to him, that gives us a good character, which weighs heavily on the scales on the day of judgment. So go back to the Islamic kind of like knowledge about what cancels, what does not cancel, mansukh, nasikh. It's such an imprecise subject to study. Look at hadith authentication. Yes, we have great scholars, Bukhari, Muslim, to somebody who must say, well, he's very careless, does tadlis or something. But again, the corpus of hadith checking. Look at development of the Sharia in terms of how it evolved, how the madhabs came about, how the fuqaha within a school of thought differ, and how you make tarjih, you know, who has the kind of like the better opinion, if you like, and preferable opinion. So when you go into all of these things, you become self-moderated. So because I'm just taking exception to one thing you said, maybe I'll become a terrorist. You will never become a terrorist as long as you're with people of knowledge, depending on Allah for guidance and using the faculty Allah gave you, the faculty of intellect to question. And then you say, I don't have to take any imam's word or sentence as if it's revelation. None of us speaks to God, and what we make from our interpretation, no matter how sincere we are, in the end is still not what Allah said, what the Rasul said, alayhi salatu wassalam. So Sheikh Paul will advise you if you have any problems, or you will learn and advise others. But nobody, inshallah, will become a terrorist if he has iman and they are seeking Allah's guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mehmet. We're going to go over to Ali Guri and then Zak Khan, followed by Brigadier Saab. So Ali.
Before you do, I just want to say salam alaikum. So Manwar can't say I haven't said a word. And Sunny, you know, we have many conversations on all sorts of things. So I think you'll be all right. Just great question though.
No, it is, and it's always good to hear Sunny's questions. Ali, do you want to ask a question, please?
Sure. Thanks. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for setting this up. I wasn't able to join the early part of it, so I'm definitely going to go and listen to the recording, and I apologize if this question has already been answered. Just let me know and we can just move on. So
don't worry, Ali.
So in this topic and of jihad, and like Sunny was saying, that I may become a terrorist, you know, understanding, hopefully there was a clear distinction made between what is jihad, Islamic jihad, and what is terrorism. In that sense, and how jihad was done, like the brother was saying, in Battle of Badr and Battle of Uhud, by Prophet ﷺ. Since my question is, since it is okay, at that time jihad was done for various reasons, and mainly because the Muslim Ummah, the small community at that time, was under threat, and they were under physical threat immensely. Now, fast forward and looking at the history between now and then, various jihads have taken place, some that are conducted in a correct manner, some not so much, as far as reasoning may be concerned. And there's debate amongst historians and scholars regarding that. Coming to today's time, where there is nation states instead of empires, we have come to a point where there are our Uthmani Empire and Mughal Empire and the Safavid Empire and all these other empires that have been broken up into 55 different countries, nation states that some may get along, some may not get along with one another, some have hidden agendas, and some, you know, they just want to have an isolationist standpoint. But looking at that history as how we got to that fragmented state and what keeps us there, yes, a lot of scholars say it's because of us, this is our punishment, and very valid points. And others say that there was others, these non-Muslim countries, who have attacked us and broken up the Uthmani Khilafat, which there's facts, it's fact-based truth. Britain, France, Italy, Russia, all ganged up on the Uthmani Empire and fragmented it up. And this was going on since 1800s. Now that we're here and we have 55 different Muslim countries, there's no single leadership to look up to, yet we continue to divide and get divided. We continue to be attacked. We continue, and we're all over the place, all over the world, even in the countries that do the attacking and are the aggressors. And this is why, you know, 9/11 happened and the terrorists movement happen, whether it's Al-Qaeda, whether it's Taliban, whether it's the Khawarijites and ISIS, etc. What then, those are prime examples of what isn't acceptable. But then what then is acceptable form of jihad? Is even jihad an option for us when we are fragmented in 55 different countries? And if it's no longer acceptable, in what sort of state can it become acceptable? Or is this no longer a part of Islam anymore? We're done with it.
Manwar, do you want to answer that question? Thanks for that. Thanks, Ali. That's a very, very good question. The hard questions go to Manwar, I'm afraid. So, yeah.
No, I apologize. I think if we get into the realms of discussion on religious kind of, this kind of matters, and it'll be all just Muslims talking. I think my first reaction would be, if you listen to my TEDx talk in 2017, I made a statement. It was very awkward to make because of how people perceived that and the backlash that came from that, because some out of politeness stayed quiet, but some understandably misunderstood it. When I said, I believe that there is no jihad in the present context, current day time period, something like that, because it will lead to greater harm. And they forgot that latter part of the emphasis, and they took the first part, I believe there's no jihad on earth, as if the last thing you said, as if I'm saying it's not in Islam at all. So I'm cancelling out ayat of the Quran. I mean, if there's a recipe for doing takfir, you have a clear case here. You don't have to be ISIS to do this. So I feel awkward because I would like to say I don't know. But why do I feel awkward? Because I know it's been recorded, and so it may be so, and it's going to be broadcasted, and there are going to be people who are going to be cynical or sarcastic without thinking. Why does that bother me? It doesn't bother me. You can call me kafir now, or you can call me a saint. I mean, it makes no difference. Allah knows my heart and your heart. But it bothers me because it muddies the water more. Because at the moment I say that I agree with you, broadly speaking, the intricacies are not discussed, and people are running with ideas they found on the internet or by the self-perusal of books, and imams don't talk about it in the mosques. So it feeds into the more harsher positions, because we are seen as hiding and compromising and diluting. And they will say, well, what do you expect? Manwar, he's a government agent, or your name, Ali, Badr Ali, well, he's confused. I mean, something like that will come across. They will not try to reason with you and get to the bottom of it. So the last thing is, if there is something that is good, that should be suspended, what are the rules of fiqh, which you must know, that sometimes you can do a smaller sin to avoid a greater sin, or a smaller harm to avoid a greater harm. I mean, these are principles we know. Or benefit should be brought about, but harm must be avoided. There is harm now, 55 nation states or what. I asked one particular leader of an Islamic movement, I said, I've read about the Abbasids, the Umayyads, the Umayyads first, then the Abbasids, then the Fatimid came along, Umayyads went to Spain. Now you have 3 caliphates, the African states as well with their own kings. Then you had after that the Ayyubids take over, then you had the Mamluks, then you have the Ottomans. What gave the right to the Ottomans, the Uthmanis, to come along and kill and fight over and take victory over the Ayyubids and the Mamluks? Go back to that. So why are we following these kind of historical precedents, if you like? What lessons have you learned from how not to make the same mistakes and how to do it better? Nothing. It's all emotionalism. So bottom line, I don't know. What do we do? Be good Muslims. Allah will change conditions, provide something. Sounds fatalistic. But on the other hand, what do you want to do? Do something that creates greater harm? There is consensus amongst the fuqaha that you must not do something which makes the bad into worse. That's all I can say. But if you can ask Sheikh Safi or Paul Armstrong and I don't know, Imam Ramzi, has he disappeared? From Oxford. Now, and there are greater imams all over the world. Please, I don't know, but I know I should not be following a warlord in the name of jihad. I was with Lashkar-e-Taiba in Pakistan, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Muhammad Saeed's group. I know some of the things they did were excessive and they would justify it. Why am I with Lashkar-e-Taiba? Because they're Ahlul Hadith or Salafi. I would rather be with them than with Deobandi Hanafis. Why am I making this separation, Deobandis and Barelvis, or Shia and Sunni, or Salafi and Sufi? What's that got to do with me, Abu Muntasir Manwar? Come on, is that my place? And then for joining in the fight, you go into one trench, you are going to be opposed by the Hizbul Mujahideen, who are all Hanafis. So did I go to Kashmir to fight for independence of Kashmir from Indians so I can then bash the head in of the Hanafis, so I can have my Ahlul Hadith steamroll over them? We got to be sensible. Muslims suffer. There are other ways. Pray, do good deeds. There's international politics. Whether you like him or hate him, there is dialogue, discussion. Get on with that and ask the ulama. I mean, ulama is not speaking to me. They're not speaking anymore about these issues. That's what the problem is. I want to hear scholars from Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia speak up and say, this is what the clear-cut evidence tells us and how we must responsibly, knowing our current culture and context, move with respect to closer things at home. Today we are debating about sisters or women can't go out to walk at night because of rape and murder and name calling. There's nothing to say about the women folk, how we treat them, to everything, Israel and Palestine. We don't hear that. And all we hear is like, let's go back to the authentic, the Quran and Sunnah, the way the Sahaba. Why do we have to have power? Nobody answers that. What's wrong with not having power? Be a minority in Britain. For me, I don't have a problem with that. Why must I rule to establish Sharia? Why must I establish a Sharia? With whom? With you? You and me? Against whom? Who are we going to keep in, filter out? So 35 years I've been in this, I'm grown old now, it's just, I can't be bothered anymore, it's too much. Brother Muhammad asked me, have you killed anyone? No. I have sent brothers from this country to fight in Bosnia, Chechnya, Philippines with Rasul Sayyaf's group. People know this, the police know this, it's not something to be hidden. I'm not proud of it, like Frankie says, not to boast, to glamorize. Point is, people have died in these adventures. Fi sabilillah, may they be forgiven, go to highest place in paradise. I live with that conscience. I send them. I said jihad. I said we have to fight for Islam. And I quoted the Quran and the Sunnah. Now I will not quote a single hadith to you.
Shaykh Manwar, thank you. It's always a pleasure to. Oh, guess what? Sheikh Ramzi has got something to say. So we must go to Sheikh Ramzi. Sheikh Ramzi, hold on. Sheikh Ramzi, where are you? Oh, there you are. So what I'm going to do, Sheikh Ramzi, there's so many people now waiting for questions. So I'm going to just quickly get you to ask a question. Someone ask Frank a hard question, please, because we're letting Frank off. Come on.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May peace and blessing of Allah be upon you all brothers, all are good, of course. I can see the Shaykh Muhammad getting in the tears, which is what happened. Of course, if you want to really ask, because we were working with anti-terrorism, many things. As I'm 40 years, I'm a die. I wouldn't see at the moment. Maybe one or two people, God bless them all, died. I can't see any, with all respect, older than myself, which has been in this profession. However, we had many people, of course, in the time of the Syria was and everything else. As many people came and they been. Let me tell you some things. During the 40 years, a time came which Christianity gone completely down, and Islam was flourished. Allah knows, hand in a heart. At that time, which I had a stool in the middle of center, 4 people a day was coming to the Islam, more or less. Allah knows best. 4 people, and I couldn't hold it. Suddenly, unfortunately, the money started to come, and the conversion of the people started to come, and the ideology of the people started to come. They did not think about Islam. They think about how could I promote my sect, promote my school of thought. That's why it came. And otherwise, a hand in the heart, I would have said that here we had at least 5 to 6 million Muslims. Now is it 3. And when I am standing on the judgment of God, I say one by one who was responsible for destroying the life of the whole and for destroying Islam as a global. It was slowly going forward. It's a long story. However, I believe, and I said at least 30 times, 40 times in TVs and whatever we work in, I said, these people are groomed. These people are innocent. They don't know that much about Islam. They don't know, and they think this is the right Islam, and they've been groomed. For example, Jack Lett is with us, always was with us. He was a little boy, but of course he went there as many times, and still he had a very good Christian families, which we are still looking after them, of course. And still I say to everybody, Jack is groomed. He was a young little boy, didn't understand what is happening. Or Shamima, bring him and bring him to justice here. Don't let him rotten there. These are the, I would like to say, is a very important, because UK, United Kingdom, are the best justice in the world. We cannot deny the justice. However, I would have thought, my brother, of course, what you asked, what Muhammad, you asked the brother Munawar, was he killed or not? I asked it as from the Martin McGuinness. Martin McGuinness was a close friend, of course, at Oxford University. He was the head of the education, and I was the head of education. And asked him, he said something to my ear, which he stays for me with the rest until I die. Everybody always say, what is it? What he said? However, it is not your fault, my brother Munawar. Munawar, it wasn't your fault. I believe you're groomed. You're a good man of Allah, and you're doing it for the sake of Allah. But of course, the people who wants to do it, done wrong. Jihad is nothing to do, if it's jihad happening in the Iraq or the Syria, nothing to do with the United Kingdom, with the Muslims. Jihad is like this. When they come in a circle, when somebody is, for example, a non-Muslim attack these countries, the next door neighbor goes. And after that, the next door neighbor, and after that, the next door neighbor, and after that, it doesn't go 5,000 or 6,000 miles in there. This is a Sharia law. But suddenly they groom that. May Allah bless you. I don't want to say you are a good man. Keep going forward. I hope to see you soon. You are a good-hearted. Doesn't matter what happened. Intention is important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala see your heart, not see your hand. And of course, Brother Frank, God bless you. You've done excellent. Of course, you had lots of difficulties, but you find your way. And God bless you, and God bless you, and thank you very much. Sorry about my apology.
No, you're wonderful, Shaykh Ramzi. It's always good to hear from you. And, we need to chat about that little meeting that you want to have with the different faith communities about something similar. And I'm sure Manwar and Frank would love to be involved in that, which we haven't told you yet, but we will let you know. We're going to go over to Zach Khan from Manchester. Am I right, Zach? And then it's going to be Fiasab, followed by Emond, and one of the hands have gone down, so someone else. So if you unmute Zach.
I'm unmuted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending upon where you are. First of all, I think I should thank AOBM, who have provided us all with this platform to interact and to converse with one another. And I think it has been an extremely successful Zoom meeting, an extremely powerful and presentable meeting, which has enabled others to listen in to other people's lives. Both speakers, Frank and Brother Manwar, have spoken very passionate and emotionally in relation to their experiences. I am a criminal solicitor, and I've represented terrorists. I represented them whilst they've been on trial, whilst they've been detained in HMP Manchester or HMP Strangeways, which is a category A prison. And I understand the difficulties which they've suffered from. I actually want to ask a quick question to Frank. Listening in to where all of this took place from and how he was groomed, I think what we need to truly focus on is the future and to stop such extremism. And what I want to know from Frank is how we should go about doing this so that we don't have more individuals who are groomed, who have to undergo that seclusion, who then are taken in by individuals of a certain ideology and then implement ideas into their heads, which make it difficult for individuals who will then feel as though they're part of a family, a part of a group. And then as that group allows them to go forward, they think that they're doing the right thing. Now, I'm a Muslim myself, but I understand jihad has nothing to do with going out to kill one another, right? Islam doesn't promote that. You may consider me to be a moderate Muslim, yes, but I understand that Islam states, and I'm not an imam, I'm not a philosopher of Islam. However, my understanding of Islam is quite simple. Jihad is actually taking care of one another. Jihad, and there have been Sahabis who didn't go to fight war because the Prophet said, you have a mother at home, go and take care of her. That's your jihad. Your jihad is actually taking care of your neighbor, because your neighbor holds more rights than going to fight in the name of alleged Islam or Christianity, Judaism. So I think what we need to focus on is how can we better ourselves as a society in order to stop such extremism? So my questions to Frank. Thank you very much, Frank. You've been honestly very, very interesting to listen to. And it's good to see that you're over across the pond and yet we're able to relate to that.
Go for it, Frank. You're on. So let's see, unmute, yeah.
Thank you for the question. And I just want to say again, before I get to the question, that I'm very honored to take part in any of this. Anytime that we have people come together and we talk about God and about our services that we could be of to one another, is a perfect time is a great day and a great moment in life. So how do I find this a spiritual battle, but again, it's not a jihad to where we are fighting, or we are against. Let me say this again. I don't want to be against anything. What we're dealing with extremism a lot, again, is a lot of character defects, fears, ego, low self-esteem, low self-worth. And so we have to look at those things inside those people. And we do need God's help with all this, as it's a spiritual thing, is to help them realize that our job on this planet is just to be of service to one another. Like you said, the service to my neighbor is more important than anything else, because I have to make sure that I show love to him. And then if I do good things for my neighbor, and this is where I get to help people, is when I do good things and they say, thank you for helping me, I say, that's God, man. It's because I believe in God. And one of the things when I knew what's going on over here in the States 3.5 years ago, when our president at the time put a ban on Muslims, like, I knew right away, like, this is not going to, how could you punish children of God who are submissive to God? How can you punish all them and not think that you're going to have to pay a price for that? And again, the price doesn't have to be us going and harming people who believe that it's okay to put a ban on Muslims. I truly have faith in my God that he'll handle that. We just need to be here to give examples and to hold a light at the end of the tunnel, to say it's okay to come out of this. It's okay to not wake up in the morning and not hate. Do not wake up in the morning. I used to wake up when I was a radical, when I would wake up and I would think about how there's black entertainment television, and I would be so angry. Why do they get that? Why don't I have that? Right? It's all about me. And so as soon as I can learn to put that to the side, that this, for one of the greatest things that I've learned in my study of religion and God, is that it's not all about me today. I'm just here to be of service. and that my life will work out just fine if I believe in that. And so if I can help that, explain that to people that are being radical, and here's the great thing is, people that are formers like me, we get to give the example where I could say, you can keep living this life, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to get, this is going to be done. You're going to lose all your friends and family. You're going to go to prison. You're going to be isolated because of your hate and beliefs. And I could sit there and watch them go live that life and keep saying, don't forget, I'm here. I'm ready to talk to you, and you don't have to live in that dark hole anymore. So we are here to help you. And that's my job. That's my job. So I hope I continue to do that as best I possibly can on this planet.
Thanks. Thank you, Frank. Brigadier Fias, do you have a question? Let me just unmute you. Asked to unmute. And then we're going to go to Emond, followed by Sibera, and then Corey. So Brigadier Fias.
Good afternoon, Mr. Frank. My question is to Mr. Frank. My doctorate is in peace and conflict studies. I'm a student of this very discipline, which relates to geopolitics. And since my background is also a military background, so I had always been focusing on international relations and strategic studies, security and defense studies. So my spectrum is little bigger than probably what we are talking at present. I want to have an insight from Mr. Frank. When we got over with Cold War and Russia got disintegrated, and from there on, when USA became the sole superpower, up till now, all wars have been fought against Muslim countries. And with connivance and support of USA, we as strategists, peacemakers and peace builders feel that Muslim countries are not very strong militarily. They have resources, and to grab those resources in some form or the other, a war is imposed on them. And we feel, as a reaction, we will never have peace, because today Muslim countries are militarily weaker. They will bear the brunt, and all efforts will be made to become stronger. And when they will become stronger, they will try to avenge what geopolitically is being done today. I would like to seek the comments of Mr. Frank. How do you feel we can bring peace? Present environment will not bring peace to the world. It would bring more wars and more wars. I, as a peace builder and peacemaker, aim in Islam as a religion is something which is peace-loving. We would like to have peace. How can that be possible in future?
Frank, what do you suggest? How do you wish to answer that question? Unmute.
Yes, sir. Got it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Sorry, there's a train going by here.
No, it's lovely. It's great. Don't worry.
So I do see peace. I mean, I wouldn't do this if I didn't see that there's a true path to peace. When we look for me, and this, again, I'm not a scholar on this, but when I looked at all the religions in this pandemic, where I got to walk every day, I take these God walks in the morning, and I will listen to an imam, or I listen to a rabbi or a minister, and I'll have them listen to them talk about humility or humbleness or service to others. And I just see that that's the biggest connection that we all have, that we know, is that each other are children of God. Like, and that I have to be there to always be able to help someone's spiritual growth, not, take away their life. And I think that that's going to change. I think that there's big changes going on coming out of this pandemic to where we're going to start getting along. I think that we're going to start seeing that we are just this small little rock that rotates around the sun, close enough that it gives us life, but far enough away that God allows us to live. And that I'll tell you, I got to meet Archbishop Desmond Tutu one time at a UN function. I actually got to open up for him. I'm very honored I got to do that. I opened up for him at the UN function we did. And in the back, at the time I was questioning my religion, and I told him, he said, Desmond Tutu asked me what religion I was. And I said, I'm sorry, sir. I used to be Catholic, but I'm not Catholic anymore. And he said, well, that's fine. He said, well, why not? And I said, because I don't believe the story about the animals in the boat. At the time I said, I still don't believe that he got, 7 of every animal, 2 of every animal on this damn boat. I don't know if I believe that story. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, I get that. I understand that you don't believe that. See, and that's the first thing we have to say to people, is when they say, I don't get this, you say, I understand why you don't get that. And then he switched it on me. He said, well, let's think of, Frank, maybe that story of the ark is about the planet. And that when the wolf and the sheep or the lamb will get along again, is when they'll get along the first time was on the ark, because they knew they had to get along on the ark, or you had to get off the ark, and you don't want to get off the ark. He said, imagine if we thought of this planet as our ark, and we don't want to get off, and we have to find a way to get along with each other. That's why we're here. And so I absolutely see peace. I wouldn't do this work if I didn't. I honestly, truly see that America, the states can change. I'm hoping that we get away from this America first attitude, which is just narcissism and fear and arrogance, which is never good. Those things only make bullies, and we need to not be the bully. And coming off of the Cold War, just so you all know, I think that I know that America was rope-a-doped. And rope-a-dope is a boxing move where a guy will just sit on the ropes and you'll pound the crap out of him, and he just takes it and he waits for you to get tired, and then he hits you back. I think that's what Russia did to us. Russia rope-a-doped us. They're winning. They are winning. QAnon is Russia. All the stuff that goes on in our, there's so much that goes back. So we didn't win no Cold War. We got rope-a-doped into thinking we won, and now we're in deep trouble, and we have to get ourselves out of it. And I only see us getting out of it with God's help. It's a spiritual battle. We need to get the people that believe in this QAnon to realize that it's idol worshiping and to stop. And then I think that America has to come to a reckoning that we've done really bad things, not just to Muslim countries. There's the opium wars in the 1900s, where we basically flooded China with opium to get their people addicted so we can have the trade routes. We did that. We have to come to terms with that. We need to make amends for these things if we are all going to get along. So I do truly, honestly see peace and love in all of us brothers and sisters, because we are all just children of God, and he loves us all the same. There's no doubt in my life and everything. He loves every one of us exactly the same. It's how do we feel his love? It's not about how much do we love him, because that's where we fight. That's where we fight. Oh, I do more mitzvahs than you. Oh, I do more jihads than you. That's where we start to. But if I just know that he loves me so much, that's the key. Not how much I love him, but how much he loves me. And to show that love is to be of service to all of his children. And we're going to get there. I believe that.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, that was beautiful. Sabira Hassan, followed by Emin Patel. Can I have Sabira, can I have a question, please? Let me just unmute you. We've got about 5 minutes, by the
Sorry,
way, so we
I've
can
got,
try to get.
my camera has gone a bit weird. So
I can
hang on.
see. I can say. I think your
The
camera is somewhere else. That's all right. Carry on.
So basically, what I wanted to mention was, we talk about like, these empires, we talk about these big civilizations, but is it not with kind of like the way young people have been exploited, not just like in in Islam, but also you're seeing it with the far right, is this harking back and romanticism of these empires and those civilizations, whether it be those Muslim ones like the Abbasids, the Umayyads, or the Ottomans, and then you look at the Romans and you look at the Vikings, that doesn't fit with the modern world. Colonialism was creating another type of sort of, these empire, but not based on religion, but based on sort of like national greed. So if we hark back to that, we're not really kind of dealing with us trying to make sense of post-colonial world where we actually have nation states. So, I mean, I don't really care where I live, what nation state I live in, as long as my human rights are protected. Now, I'd rather live, let's say, here for now, although I'm off to Europe because I don't like Brexit, and I feel that as a Muslim, my human rights are more in jeopardy than if I were in, let's say, another like European country, where I'm probably going to go to Spain, where we have the sort of like big Islamic empires, and even though the far right is the third largest company, third largest political party, Vox, they still have human rights and they still have equality law from the EU. I still have protection. So what I'm trying to say is that, going down this kind of route of looking at, civilizations, we have to learn how we, what does the panel think? Do we just need to learn how to be individuals, no matter what our faith is, and learn and live within nation states while our human rights are protected? And I think, as Frank said, caring for our planet, maybe that's the route we kind of need to take. And if you look at the kind of like that golden era of Islam, where they talked about convivencia, maybe what we're living now is convivencia, where we're collaborating, we're working together, and what we're not doing. And then when history is told in 500 years time, if we survive, they'll actually say, wow, they had this kind of time in history where we were all like, in dialogue, and Muslims lived in Christian countries and Christians lived in Muslim, so I think we kind of do need to learn about the history of these empires, even just like, this LARPing sort of, far right, looking at the, Viking times and stuff. They're doing the same. Anyway, that's it. Those are my comments. Just what do the panel think?
No, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to basically also ask Emond and Corey and Ali for a question. And then, first of all, once they've finished asking the questions, Frank and Manwar, can you address the first question to Sabera first? So, Emond, do you have a question also? Emond, where's Emond? Okay, Corey, do you have a question? Hi, Corey. Let me just get you to unmute. Hi.
All right, can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Okay. Hey, this question's for Frank mainly, but anybody else that wants to give input. So Frank, I know that I've read your book and kind of stayed abreast of some of the documentaries and interviews that you have done in the past. You've gone from one extreme, the radical right, to some, I've seen some of the criticism that you've gotten now for people who knew the old Frank, maybe suggesting that you've gone too far left. I've seen like some silly comments and stuff that while you're advocating for some of the African-American discrimination going on here in the States, some people are saying, hey, now you're too far left. So one time you're too far right, now you're too far left, both extremes. How do you address that? How do you stay somewhere in the middle to where you can still fight for what you believe in and maybe undo some of the things of your past, but also not be categorized in the too far left extreme? That's it.
Okay, so all right. So first of all, both Frank and Manwar, do you want to address to Sabira's comments that we should study more about the history of our empires and our collective history to understand where people are coming from? And then to what Corey mentioned, specifically to yourself, Frank, are you becoming too soft, too liberal, too left-wing? So Manwar first, and then let's see, Manwar, and then in fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to unmute both of you, so maybe you can have a conversation about this with each other and with us. Oops, hold on. Let's just see, unmute. So Manwar and Frank.
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Well, Sabira, that question is very good. I think in a very brief response, I brought.
So do you want to answer Sabira's question?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear you. Don't worry, I can hear you.
Yeah, no, as I was speaking, then you spoke something. I thought you were trying to tell me something. No, yeah, I mean, I was answering Sabira's question that broadly speaking, I do agree with whatever she mentioned, because I can't recapitulate all of that. But I picked up 2 points that I wanted to very quickly mention. One is that I fundamentally agree, and I think it's of extreme importance that we do try and learn a little bit more about histories, whether of Asia or Europe or Muslim history or Christian history. I mean, I tried to read about the church history, about 7 volumes of it. I hardly finished one, but at least I made an attempt. Convicencia and so on, you talk about in terms of Spain, again, the reality of what actually obtained in Spain. So that's the first point. We need to learn histories. The second point is when we do that, what will happen is we'll find that many of the mythological way in how we kind of promote, whatever, some far-right supremacist ideology perhaps, or in my case, of course, Islam, can be very easily tackled by simple information. You know, the very fact I mentioned that we had the Umayyads, what was the big necessity to replace it with the Abbasids, and then with the others, and then with the others, and what had they actually done? What was this empire building about, and what were the excesses? There were good things done, but that's human kind of like polities and governmental infrastructure building. But in terms of how nations invaded, exploited, enslaved, so you'll find 3 things within that. We have a mythological concept of the Ummah, our great and glorious nation. I shed that through learning, not become cynical to the point that I don't experience brotherhood, but I know some of it is mythological for an ideology. Our glorious past, one is Ummah, one is the past. What is this glorious past? It's like the history of any other people, Chinese civilization, to when we talk about something local, like how did the Bengalis come about and flourish in East and West Bengal? I mean, it's human history of different parts of the world. And the third thing is, of course, our mythical appreciation and or knowledge of what we claim to be sacred. Yes, we have many things which are sacred. Of course, God to us is something, as religious people, different to those who don't believe in God. We have some sanctity about something that are godly, like prayer or church or Makkah and so on. But ultimately, religion, Sheikh said so, Imam said so, and this is what our fiqh says so. So learn histories and learn how we are actually all human. Is human rights that matter? Where is it preserved the best way or the most convenient for me so I can flourish under that system with my Iman to be a Muslim? Thank you.
Okay,
And to go
Frank,
off,
do you want
first to go off the history part.
Answer Corey's comment that you're too soft.
Sure. I love the way you pose that question. But first, just on the history.
Sorry.
You know, we have to study history. Just in the fact that it's what tells what's going to happen in the future in a way. Like, I mean, if you look at what we have here in the States, we have Fox News, which is a news organization that helps with the idol worshiping. But Fox News compared to Hate Radio in Rwanda, which helped break that war. If you compare those two, you'll start to see what the future is, you know, that we're following down extremist paths. And we can just always look through you know, even through the rise of Mussolini and the the Nazis, you look at some of the idolizing stuff that's going on now and know that we're still dealing with the same issues. They just remanifested themselves, right? Hate in America, we had the KKK. And then that went away because, you know, they got in trouble and they did bad things and hung people. And so then the white supremacist neo-Nazis rose up years later. And then that went away because they did some really bad things, blowing up federal buildings. And then that went away. But hate always manifests itself. And now we have the Proud Boys and Fox News, okay? So that's just looking at history and showing that we're going down the same route, and to be knowledgeable of that and to bring that knowledge. On my part, if I become too soft, and I think that what people have been saying about me, and it's just fine because I don't care what people say about me, I only care about what God thinks of me, is that I went from an extreme right-wing race war to Black Lives Matter because I regained humility. I regained humanity for the world. I regained things that I know that we have, again, 2.7 million children of God in prison in America. That's now 27 to 28% of the world's population in prison is in America, when we only have 4% of the population. For me to not be able to go and scream and yell that there is a problem here is not being too left-wing. It's being able to, because of my past and knowing racist and knowing that there's a lot of neo-Nazis who became cops, there's a lot of far-right extremists in our policing, I have to stand up for other of God's children and say, here's a problem and here's how we fix it. Because we do need real police reform here. And that is my goal in life. That is what I believe God is asking me to do right now, because we have a police force that is allowed to pull Black people over because they didn't use their turn signal, and they're allowed to extract them from their cars and search their cars for other crimes, which has filled our mass incarceration system. So if I can identify the problem, why would I, with God's help now, stand here and scream, there's a problem. We have issues. We need to deal with these issues. And if people want to say I'm becoming too left because of that, that's fine, because I know that the knowledge that I have, that God has given me to go through the trash that I went through, to have the knowledge that this stuff is not right. And what else should I be doing on this planet but other than using what God gave me so that at the end I can glorify God and say, the only reason why I know this is because God took mercy on me and allowed my soul to learn things about myself that is now being reflected in the way our country has problems right now. What else am I supposed to do but be of service at this time? I have no other choice. If not, I'm going against what I believe my God, my higher power wants me to do, my creator of this whole planet. I mean, God controls it all. He loves us all so much. Why would I not stand up for his children that I see a system that is broken and is keeping us a broken nation and keeping that wound opened with no stitches put in it so that we can just keep bleeding out here in America? So I can't help but stand up and scream right now. Black Lives Matter. Breonna Taylor mattered. The police don't have rights to kick in our door over drugs and shoot Black people and say, well, we're just following the laws. Like, we can't live this way anymore. So I'm not going to stop screaming it until we start to really fix it. And that's my job, I feel. So I hope that's too left. I guess I'm left, but I just know I gained humanity in my heart to stand up for others.
So Muhammad, Frank is muted. Muhammad, are you there?
Audio. There you go. I do apologize about that. I was speaking to myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've run out of time. But what I was saying is, if anyone has any questions, if you can email them or message them to me, I'll pass the questions on to Frank or yourself, Manwar, and we'll keep this conversation going. You know, one of the greatest things about people talking who hold strong convictions is that there's a certain amount of kind of realism or honesty. It doesn't matter if you're left wing, right wing, center, whatever. But by remaining humble in how we kind of speak with each other, our words and actions tell our story rather than our hatred. And I hope that we learn from this Zoom and other Zooms. We're hoping to connect with each other more and learn from each other. So I'm host the Zoom. But thank you, everyone. I can see Zach and Ali raising their hands. With respect, brothers, if you can send a message through by email, or would those questions to Frank. Very much, everyone, and it's been great seeing you and connecting with you today. I hope you found this Zoom interesting. See you soon. Thank you.